Again, thank you for joining us today for a discussion of CUI data. I think this represents the sixth webinar we have done on various aspects of CMMC, its importance to the defense industrial base and to safeguarding the nation's critical information. I'm Philip Denny, president of USGovCert. USGovCert is a company that builds a solution to helping government contractors, particularly small to mid-sized contractors, negotiate and navigate the certification process. We've been in business for quite a number of years. We've also been government contractors for about 25 or so years. Again, the tool we build is called USGovCert, which is a tool to help the government contractors complete their certification process for CMMC and a few other certifications that are typically required of government contractors, such as the ISO certifications or the CMMI certifications. Today, if you can go to the next slide, we have a panel of four esteemed panelists: Chris Haigh, Kelly Kendall, Robert Ashcraft, and Steve Palamara. Combined, they have, I'm not quite sure, this is not a dig on their age, but they have over 100 years of experience in this field. Again, I think they've been involved with cybersecurity before it was called cybersecurity. Let's take, for example, Chris Haigh. Chris is the president of Meerkat Cyber. He's been involved in this industry for over 30 years. Not only has he been involved on the technical side, but he has also been involved from the policy side, working as a Senate policy analyst and CTO. He's also been the author of Microsoft and Ingram CMMC Level 2 Implementation Guide. So he has real world significant experience. Kelly is a president and CEO of KNC Strategic Services. Kelly himself is a veteran, and his company is a service-disabled vet organization. So he has not only significant experience with the CMMC, but he from an assessor's point of view, but he has been on the other side of that table as a company, such as most of you are, who are seeking certifications, and they will at least tell you a little bit about themselves prior to the discussion that we will have. But this is just kind of an overview. Robert has been involved in this industry for a long time. He is also currently a professor teaching cybersecurity at a university. He holds certifications for CCP, CISA, quite a few certifications. He manages CMMC implementations. He does IT audits in government and has been around for quite a long time. And he's the president of CMMC Solutions, which is a consultancy that focuses on helping small to mid-sized and some large organizations pursue their cyber certification. Steve is a vice president of one of the largest MSPs who focuses significantly, if not exclusively, on this field, on helping government contractors, not only contractors, but some government agencies safeguard their data. He's been involved in this industry for over 25 plus years. And 5 years, for 5 years, he has been a leader and authority on NIST 800-171 and CMMC compliance. He is an expert in cybersecurity. compliance. And if you have questions about MSPs, Steve is the person to go to. So I want to turn this over to the panelists so that they can tell you a little bit about themselves, and at the same time, um, provide any information they have about this critical topic, the topic of CUI data. Chris, if you can take over and just do a kind of an overview here.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for this opportunity and for arranging this. Um, One of the topics we want to start off with is the significance of CUI and why we're even here. Why are we protecting this? And it comes with a history in the United States. There was an executive order that Obama passed that created CUI and also created who the executive agent is, who controls it in the United States. And it's a fascinating story that I actually, until this year, didn't understand the depths of the story. CUI came about because a lot of our agencies had terms for their sensitive information, but they each had their own terms for when they could share it. This is Controlled Unclassified Information is what CUI stands for, and it is any unclassified information that the US government creates or possesses that requires safeguarding or some kind of control that limits the distribution. So all the agencies had their own way of doing this. One of the consequences of having every agency left up to their own methods is literally 9/11. And the CUI history dates back to we knew more than we were able to really reconstruct and put together to prevent 9/11. We didn't know how to share it. So the fascinating thing about CUI is it was born from our own mistakes of, yeah, we have a lot of sensitive information. Maybe it's not top secret, it's unclassified, but it's still sensitive. So we can't just put it out in the public. So CUI necessarily is protected from public view, but the agencies needed a way to share with each other what it is that is sensitive and therefore, something that's relevant to protecting the government. Thus, CUI was born. Signed into law by President Obama. It did put NARA at the helm. We had a incredibly recent Inspector General report where they went in and reviewed how's it working. And maybe NARA is not going to be the agency that is going to continue to be the executive agent of CUI. But for now, that is our executive agent. They come up with, here are the classifications of CUI, here are the ways you can share it, and they oversee this program that we all care deeply about because this is sensitive information. It affects lives, it affects our military, and it affects even the security of our country. So we're all here. CMMC is here to protect CUI, but also put in rules as far as when we can share it and when it's important to share it. So I want to start it off with that, give you guys an understanding of how we got here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Robert, could you do let the people know who you are, your experience in this field?
Okay. Yeah. Robert Ashcraft, helped the top 3 prime with their 1 division go in and help lead the CMMC effort on it, saving $1 million, and also help in leading their the new policies, procedures for CMMC with it. It gave me a good look because of the hundreds of applications they had, and as far as in manufacturing and everything, to be able to understand the mitigations and markings and everything of how they were adjusting to the new practices. And as far as marking and et cetera, it was interesting because I had this question from another prospective client of, they bring in people to their facility and how are they going to know with some of the people doing the tour, where can he not take certain people who do not have the rights or whatever, or it could be international type people, to go to certain areas. And one thing the Prime did was very, very easy, is that they color coded the signs that they had, the warning banners that they had posted. So red, evidently, you better have good full clearance for it, and had a light blue means that area is okay. And by doing that, education was on training on it was very little with it, and it took common colors to be able to go and adhere to a practice. NARA has a document out that comes up with standard banners and everything for you to use. You don't have to go and try to make them up yourself. They're out there, and just look up the NARA standards for marking, and up on the internet you'll find it, and use that to be able to go to help you on the handling and marking of your CUI. Okay, Philip?
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, tell the audience a little about yourself, and at the same time, how you come to be an expert in this area, and any advice you can give the audience about, say, CUI.
Sure.
At the same time, audience, before we start, we have a poll question that so that we can get a better sense of who's on. If you can respond to the poll questions when time permits.
All right. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for taking your time to join us today. So my name is Kendall, CEO and President of KNC Strategic Services. We're one of the authorized C3 PAOs, number 45. Currently, I believe, we're at number 56 right now total. So I'm here both as an official assessor to be once the assessments start, but we're also a CMMC consulting firm. We've been doing this for many, many years. So we know both sides of working with clients, getting ready for CMMC, and preparing to become the official assessors as well. So yeah, CUI is what it's all about. It's all about the data, and it's all about that protection, and it's all about knowing what you have. And there's so many things we're going to talk about in here, and I know every single one of us on the panel can pontificate for a long time, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stop myself. I have the desire to, but I won't. But no, it's good to be here. This is really, really important. This is what it's about in protecting our country. It sounds silly but this is such a key part of protecting our country, because we're getting our tails beat by some serious adversaries. And if you just hear the F-35 story alone and what's stolen from us, what China was able to do, that kind of stuff can't happen. So that's what this is all about.
Thanks, Kelly. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about Lifeline data, data systems, and how a qualified MSP can help the audience protect the CUI.
Yes, thanks, Philip. My name is Steve Palamara, and I'm the Vice President over Lifeline Data Centers. And I work in the with the CMMC Fast Track program that we have put together. Our offering is we're one of the largest secure private data centers in the Midwest. We've got 2 data centers, both over 100,000 square feet, one in Indianapolis, Indiana, and then the other is in Fort Wayne. And what we do for the Defense Industrial Base is we secure their CUI with an alternative to GCC High, leveraging Microsoft solutions in our data center. So we have a secure VDI enclave solution for small to medium-sized defense contractors. And it really, kind of to Kelly's point of providing a service that is critical to the infrastructure, our defense contracting and defense infrastructure. What we do is inexpensively and rapidly get coach companies through to compliance 100%. And I've got some things I want to talk about later. I won't cover it now, but I do want to talk about enclave solutions and how they help as far as CUI, protecting CUI.
Fantastic. One thing that most companies are going to be challenged with is understanding how to categorize their CUI data. Some pieces might be more important than others. Can you give relevant examples, detailed examples of how CUI can be categorized and how defense contractors can easily, I mean, this is just one more task that leaders of small to mid-sized businesses have on their plate. How do you go about helping them? What information can you give them to help them categorize their CUI? Anyone can take that.
Sure, I'll take that. You, first and foremost, we guide people to look at your contract. Whatever contract you have with your prime or with the government directly is going to give you a lot of information, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. In CUI, the government, this is, again, the definition of CUI is this is information that the government owns or possesses that is allowing you to share and utilize to help in the government's purposes. So if they hand over CUI to you, generally it's going to be marked and it's going to be discussed in detail in the contract. However, CUI is relatively new to everybody. This is 2010 when the executive order came into place, and there are still plenty of people in the federal government that don't properly mark it, and it may not make it into full detail. To that end, we have the CUI registry that is hosted at both the DoD, and you can Google that and get there, or you can go to NARA and find the CUI registry, which is going to give you a lot more information on what are the types of CUI that you have out there. There are tutorials that are required by CMMC that people go through to understand how to handle and classify CUI. Importantly, the old stuff out there that maybe was never marked CUI, the requirements don't require us to go back through and sift through that. But if we're ever going to point back to an old document and bring up parts of that document, then we need to understand CUI well enough that we can properly mark that. And there are lots of different categories you can look through there. Some of the most common are going to be no foreign, which means this should not be distributed to foreign entities. You'll see that a lot in the DoD space. So a lot of our contractors are dealing with that for obvious reasons. There's some sensitive information that we don't want China to be able to replicate our F-35 for good reason. We spent billions of dollars, and we have a breach that we actually have a Department of Justice case that was brought because of that against some Chinese citizens. They literally were able to get into our systems, unbeknownst by us for a while, and take terabytes and terabytes of data and reconstruct the F-35. That's a tragic story. They know our weaknesses because of that. They may know the Achilles heels of the F-35, but even worse, they have our IP and it's sitting on Chinese tarmacs. So those are the kinds of, that's a perfect example. And I know Kelly brought this up. Perfect example we point to of here's why we need to protect this stuff. When they go into subcontractors, and those are sometimes mom and pop shops with a very small budget, they can get through the firewalls a lot easier than the Boeings and the Lockheeds. So when the Department of Justice and the DoD went to Boeing and Lockheed and said, hey, this sensitive information, your CUI that you're protecting, why is that over there in China? Boeing and Lockheed didn't know. And typically it's because it's a subcontractor, maybe 6 layers down, that had the breach. So this CMMC requirement came around because of that, so that we can classify and mark and better protect and know, to Kelly's point earlier, know when you have CUI in your system, where it's stored, what you need to do to protect it. That's really the definition and the reason for CMMC.
It's great. One of the things you brought up a couple of webinars ago is when the breach occurs, and let's say, for example, you are a subcontractor to a large prime, the government will assess the penalty against a large prime, but 9 times out of 10, or maybe 10 times out of 10, the prime is just going to pass that penalty on down to you as a sub. So when they assess $1 million penalty against Lockheed for violating CUI rules or what have you, and causing exposure, that doesn't mean that Lockheed might pay that, but I'm pretty sure they're going to come after you, small contractor, to make them whole again. So that's something that you should consider as a small business. So anything else on this topic, the categorizing or examples?
No, well, with it, you want to make sure you work with your contract manager. I mean, they're learning just as you're learning. They're going through the education, and it's CMMC's new. There will be mistakes, etc., and they know that, and everyone should be aware of that. And so just reach out, and they're there to work with you through it. So anything you see, worst thing is to make an opinion onto yourself and go forward. Reach out and get some guidance on it, and that way you've taken the best steps forward. Okay.
That's it. So handling and storage of CUI. We touched upon this a little. Can we talk about physical or digital security measures that you can use to help you safeguard CUI? Can you include tips on securing offices, workstations, electronic devices? I know, Robert, you touched upon that a bit when we talked about color coding. Is there anything else that can be done, color coding areas of a business when individuals are coming through? People that may not have the clearance. Is there anything else we can do digitally or physically to help safeguard CUI?
I think the first thing that you really have to do, and this is one thing I think that kind of gets missed as I go around over the past couple of years, what's your boundary? Because once you know what your boundary is, then you can go and come up with how do I approach it? If you go and you make assumptions and just go ahead and start putting out parameters and maybe categories for everything, then all of a sudden go, oops, well, we forgot this. It may be something that will throw out your whole process that you had configured for. So the first thing, make sure you have a boundary diagram on it. That way you can see any external references or people that you're working with internally, like on the storage physical, what's really physically in scope. You may say that, oh, well, we have a couple different centers and one is just strictly commercial. But then you find out that some of the people who are working on defense actually end up in the other building. And they're printing in the other building, and it's CUI that's on the printer. So now all of a sudden, that building's in scope because there's printers in there where they're printing. So you really make sure you identify fully where your people are with everything that they're doing and how are they working with it, scanners, printers, USB devices, etc. with it. Then you can go in and create your categories.
Anyone
Kelly?
else want to?
Yeah, Kelly, I know that you have some good background on this too.
I'm too busy trying to post stuff in the chat. No, I'm posting links. I posted the links to that CUI marking guide, and I'm going to post a couple more just as you're talking some of these resources that are mentioned. But I wanted to capture those. But another thought, I keep thinking about this, and it's been in the back of my mind. But with CUI, there's so much confusion, and one of the biggest confusions is almost a panic on some companies of trying to figure out how they mark their information. And, oh, I've got to mark, how do I mark mine? Oh, is mine CUI? Is my information CUI? I've had that conversation over the last couple of years, and I want to help try to clarify a point on this. It's really, really important about what is CUI and what is not CUI too, which is you're never CUI until you provide it to the federal government, then it's CUI to them, or you are creating a CUI on behalf of a contract that you are working on, and it's part of the deliverable of the contract. So your proprietary information, it's not CUI. So you don't have to mark your own information. Hopefully you're not, hopefully you haven't already, but I wanted to clarify that too. But you mentioned the CUI boundary, and for me, it's about the data flow. We call it the data flow diagram as a key artifact at the beginning of an assessment. I need to understand as an assessor where CUI touches your environment. So that boundary that you're talking about is so critical. So understanding the flow of CUI through your company, where it starts and where it goes through its entire life cycle, all the way to destruction, is such a good exercise, and you will learn so much from it, and that will help you build your assessment scope much more effectively than just trying to randomly come up with, well, we think we do here, we think we do there. So it's a very critical practice, as well as going through a data flow exercise to make sure you know everywhere CUI can touch, and inventory your CUI. What do you have? Where is it? I digress.
Fantastic. So can someone inevitably, you may throughout your life conducting business with the federal government encounter a breach of CUI. What is the standard response when you discover that there is a breach? Is there a regulation that dictates how you respond to a breach? And if you have any examples of how companies you've worked with may have encountered and responded to a breach.
I can take that for starters, but welcome other people joining in. There is DFAR 7012, which is in pretty much every federal contract right now. DFAR is Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. 7012 is very well known throughout our space and through DIB contractors because it goes to a prime. You need to protect information in this way, and it flows down, we call it flow down, to all the subcontractors who would handle any of that sensitive information. And we're talking about federal contract information and or CUI. What DFAR 7012 does outline, and you can look in there, are certain provisions for responding to breaches. If you've had some kind of an incident, they do require, this is who you need to call, and they lay it out, as well as the time frame. It's 72 hours in which you need to do this. The DoD tracks that importantly and is able to use that information to gather enough data to tell other people, hey, it looks like we have some information here that the rest of the DIB needs to know. Maybe it's a coordinated attack or something that we need to alert others this is coming. So there's this requirement that you report back to the DoD that this is happening and the details of that incident. But CMMC goes above and beyond that. They also want to see that you have an incident response plan in place. That's a requirement, that you actually go through exercises periodically. So maybe every 6 months, you're sitting down with your whole team and making sure you understand what to do if there is an incident, and you follow the incident response plan, call the authorities, et cetera, because we don't want to be caught with our pants down. We don't know what to do in an incident, and it just gets worse and worse as time progresses.
So what are the penalties for not, for example, meeting that 72-hour reporting window? What are the potential penalties? Because I imagine it would be an individual approach by the government.
The way the government enacts CMMC and DFARS is through acquisition, and you can lose your contracts. You can lose your contract that you have. You can lose the ability to bid on future contracts. You can literally get blackballed. There are also financial penalties. So the government can come after you, and there's something called the Lincoln's Law, also False Claims Act, one and the same. That, yep, Elvis, right on point. False Claims Act says, hey, if you're telling people you're doing something, but you're really not, and the federal government finds out, they will prosecute you. That can get ugly. False Claims Act can be prison time. So if there's an executive that misled or just completely falsified in a statement to the federal government that, yes, we're doing this when you didn't, beware. The False Claims Act is becoming more and more popular, has more teeth than it ever has since Abraham Lincoln's time. And what they're doing with that is they're getting a whole bunch of penalties financially. It made more money last year than it's ever made before for the federal government. But also they're really making sure the contractors appreciate the gravity of this. You're telling us you're doing things, and this came because CMMC wasn't originally, it's early stages. It wasn't a requirement. It was, hey guys, we want you to self-attest. Tell us under oath that you're doing all these 171 requirements. And 5 Inspector General reports later, we discovered that was a failure. We trusted the contractors and subcontractors to self-attest that they're doing this. And when we went in and looked, the Inspector General reports looked, are they doing it? Over and over, no, they're not. So here's CMMC getting born. We're going to send in third parties. Third-party assessors will come in and make sure, because you guys said you were doing it, and maybe there were misunderstandings. That's very possible. This is new to everybody. That's technical jargon. It's technical configurations. Maybe that was going on. Or maybe people just saw a $6 million contract and said, of course we're doing that because we want to do business with the government. Whatever the reason, it wasn't happening. So here we are with CMMC, which says we're going to confirm you're doing it.
Anyone else want to add to that? Okay. Transmission, we touched upon that a little while ago. How do you securely transmit or share your CUI? What are protocols that are typical when you're going to send CUI to someone else? The other question that I would, as an addition to this, when you get information that was not labeled CUI from a partner or prime or sub, and you realize that it is CUI or potentially is CUI, how do you respond to that? What are typical responses and what should you do?
I can start with that one. One of the things about receiving versus sending, I'm going to take the last of what you said. The receiving part of it is, I work with a lot of clients that receive unencrypted CUI coming from government officials, what is government employees, which is a big no-no. They're not supposed to do that, but it happens. So if you're receiving unencrypted CUI, are you supposed to report a leakage? Or should you just report back to that person and say, I'm going to say this bluntly, I'm a Marine, so I could say this. Stop being an idiot and sending me unencrypted CUI. No, you can't say that. You could try it, see how it goes. No, but you can't control what gets sent to you. So you need to be able to react what's sent to you. But more importantly, it's about the sending. If you're going to send CUI, one, you have to send it to someone who is authorized, someone who has a business purpose for it, someone is, who is supposed to be receiving it. So if you're working with one of your subcontractors and you're sending it to them, understandable, it's part of the project, they're authorized, but don't send it to someone else. Do not send it unencrypted, just like I mentioned before. So if you're going to email it to someone, send it encrypted. Proper encryption seems kind of like a no-brainer, but it unfortunately happens a lot that it isn't sent that way. So I'll start with that. I know others want to probably jump into, so I'm just going to stay there.
Any other ideas about receiving CUI or sending CUI?
Don't expect the government to be perfect either.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the biggest offenders come right out of the DoD, or a prime contractor. So there will be opportunities for sure for companies to get CUI and say, geez, I thought this should have been marked, or this sure looks like CUI that, they should have encrypted when they sent. Happens all the time right now. This is a field that people don't know enough. That is part of why CUI training is required in CMMC programs. But it's going to be an education for many years to come. Just help other people out. You don't, as Kelly said, you probably don't want to be offensive about it, but hey, I think this is CUI that I'm looking at, and I wondered if this should be something we're receiving. We have clients that we've consulted that their whole business program is set up to disseminate CUI, and they're not checking on who's receiving it. And it's not a subcontractor that's required to receive it to work for them. but it's an opportunity for somebody to bid on something. So they send the CUI out. That's a no-no. We can't do it the way it's been done for 20 years because, that's how your business was set up. There are new ways to do things, and there's an education that we all need to go through.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot of, with it, the government has portals, the big primes have portals, et cetera, and they all require the MFA with it. So make sure as you're connecting and if you're setting something up yourself, a portal, the encryption is there. Make sure the MFA is there. Make sure that you follow all the guidelines. If you have questions, there's plenty of communities to go out to, but also we'll go back again to your contract manager, because he'll be able to go and point out what areas of the contract, maybe some are just level 1, some level 2, maybe some top secret. And each of those areas you have to be aware of, so that as you engage your suppliers, you're aware that, okay, this one part of the contract where this supplier is providing this widget is only level 1 with it. So you don't have as high of a worry or anything working with them versus someone who's with 3 or top secret information. So you put the proper controls in for the proper areas of the contract as deemed, by the government in the contract.
That is all good, very good advice. I'm quite sure there are a number of companies who are on the webinar who might be a cleared facility at the secret or top secret level, and they have a regimen for safeguarding data. So there should be similarities. This is between how they go about safeguarding their cleared data, and if they're a holding company, and how they safeguard CUI. Is that a fair statement? Is it the same? And if you have, for example, a cleared facility and you are responsible for taking care of your data in that regard, do you have to do anything different or special for CUI? Or is that covered with your protection of your facility's clear data that you have access to? No response?
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Facilities is just one part of protecting. So yes, facilities are important, but it depends on how you control the facility as well. Like some people will know certain facilities, you walk in, you have to drop your cell phones. You're not allowed to bring those in there. No cameras, things like that. So facilities is just one part of the protection that's required by CMMC. Any handling of CUI that goes to, it goes through email or goes into maybe a not secure facility or a secure facility still has to be protected in other ways. Is that facility handling email in a certain way? Are employees allowed to connect using their laptops from home? All that is contemplated by CMMC. How can we make sure it's not just, yeah, we have a guard and armed guard or whatever at our very secure facility. It goes way beyond that.
I think one thing that gets forgotten, and it's not only just in CMMC, I see it across the board in all of the other Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, banking, et cetera, is paper. It's easily forgotten because everyone focuses on the hack, et cetera, with it. But paper's so easy to throw in the garbage. It's so easy to leave on a printer. So easy to leave out on your desk. And all those items you must keep on top of. And a printer's in an open area. Well, then you need a sign. Go back to NARA, get a sign, and train the people. If they print something, they go over to the printer and pick it up. If other people see something on the printer and they have an idea it might be, then they have to go and warn or alert somebody that there is paper there on it. It's a company approach with training, signage, and just awareness of making sure that you also with it, you can have certain bins that are designated for sensitive paper with it, and they can be a locked type of ones with a cover so that they're locked so people can't go in. You insert the paper in with a slit on it and make sure, again, people with rights who can go in and then make sure it gets shredded. And again, using the right cross-cut shredder so that it can't be reassembled. Do you ever see Blue Bloods where they sat down and they went and took something that was all shredded and they went back with the program and recreated the paper? That's because that was a simple shredder. So you got to make sure you put all the proper parameters around with paper, lock and key, etc. Okay.
Fantastic. So, a lot of the contractors, small contractors in particular, are going to depend on MSPs to help them negotiate this or navigate this new era. What can an MSP do for a small company to help them safeguard their data? What tools, technologies exist that make this easier for the defense industrial base? Stephen, I'm kind of directing this at you and everyone else.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So our business is setting up enclaves for companies. So and it's really a compliance as a service model. So we're a highly compliant data center, and they're able to through a shared responsibility matrix for 800-171, defense contractors are able to inherit 90% of the 800-171 controls. So 60% direct and 30% shared responsibilities, and those are all defined within our responsibility matrix. And one of the first questions that I ask early on when we're working with companies is what percentage of your business is DoD? And a lot of companies will say maybe 10, 20, 30%. They know that from their financials. But then the next question I ask is, do you have a CUI boundary diagram? And 100% of that, very, very rarely do we get the answer yes. So most don't. And so therefore, they don't know how many people are in scope. They don't know what applications or data are in scope, resources, kind of to Bob's point of printers and CNC machines. They kind of know, but we need to go through and get that detail. So when we're starting on projects with these companies, you've got to go through, when we're setting up an enclave, you want to minimize disruptions because companies or these workers, they're working on commercial solutions and DoD solutions. So the whole point of an enclave is to minimize disruptions for your working staff. And what we do is, so we minimize the number of companies will come to us and say, okay, well, we have 100 employees, 30%, that's about 30 employees. So that's a rough guess, right? So we'll quote for 30 users. But by the time we get to the point where they're signing a contract, we have them down to 5 users. And it's typically the sales and contract people that are the first line of defense. They're the ones that are easily defined. And then we'll go in and do a CUI a CUI boundary diagram to be able to, it's kind of a land and expand approach where we start with a small number of users. We can certify that enclave and then expand from there by going through a CUI boundary diagram and bringing in the users that come into scope, the applications and the data that comes into scope, and getting there from that standpoint. The other piece that helps there is the when you do a dry run on a CMMC assessment before your actual assessment, it's easier to do because it's a smaller scope. It's a smaller number of individuals. So you're focusing on the environment itself. The other piece that we have that's important is ITAR. So we have U.S. citizens for MSPs and MSSPs that are supporting this group. And finally, our goal is to take the endpoints out of scope as much as possible. So with our VDI solution, we're we're moving all of the applications, and the individuals we're locking down the individuals' machines, and they're running and processing everything in the data center. So we're taking all that out of scope. So that's how we're setting up these, the boundary in that sense all becomes the processing at the data center.
Thank you for the response. Go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to add one more thing about MSPs. That's a huge topic right now. If you have somebody who the DoD calls them is an external service provider, and they provide some kind of a security, I guess, service that they're helping you out, and that is an MSP or MSSP. In December, the new rule, which is 2.1, CMMC 2.1, we anticipate this, it's at the White House right now under OIRA. We anticipate this being exactly what's in front of Congress in a month or two. This new rule says if you have an MSP or MSSP or any external service provider who provides a security function of some sort, they need to be CMMC certified. It's a big change from where we were. So this is a question you want to have with your MSPs as well, and with the lifelines and companies that are providing those services. Lifeline is on their CMMC certification path and on FedRAMP. You need to have that conversation to make sure your MSP is able to do that. It's not a cheap venture. So if they're providing these services, make sure that, and maybe you've been with them for years, make sure that they know they need to go get certified, because here's what the new rule says. Every contractor and subcontractor has to be using an external service provider that is already certified, not even that is getting there and they'll be there in a year. There's no grace period built into the rules that currently stands. So those MSPs we anticipate being kind of through the floodgates, the first people to go get certified as soon as this rule is in force, the law of the land, because they're going to have to be certified before the contractors that they service are certified. And the DoD said, look, it's the reason we're doing this is not to be a burden on everybody. They're handling security functions for the DIB. If there's somebody in there that's just, I'm going to make more money if I flip off the switch here and have a security lapse from, midnight to 3 a.m. and then flip the switch back on, everything was normal. That's too much power. And the DoD recognized that. So version 2.0 of CMMC didn't have it. 2.1 said, no, we're going to make sure we lock that down as well. But again, incredibly critical for any of you who are out there working with MSPs, and most mom and pops do that. They don't have the resources to have their internal IT department. So we get it, but you need to have that conversation.
Great. So the question that a small company was asked their MSP is, are you CMMC certified? And it would matter if they're at level 1 or level 2, I would imagine. They would have to be at the level that their customer supports data at.
That's exactly right.
Fair statement.
That's exactly right.
Great.
And none of them are certified right now, because MSPs don't have a path to certification unless they have a government contract right now. But as soon as the rule becomes the law of the land, then they're going to rush through. And that's what they need to be thinking about right now, because the average time to implementation is not a month. It's 12 to 18 months for most companies to get. Now, an MSP is skilled, so I think they're going to be able to do it much faster. But this is not something where you can set up some configurations and sit for your assessment next week. It's going to take time. So they need to be on the path.
Right. It's not a flip of the switch. Definitely.
So those are the questions that the companies that are on the call need to start asking today. And the answer cannot be, well, we are on the,
if they say what's CMMC, they say what's CMMC, that's a bad day.
Okay. Okay.
Or how to spell it.
Okay. Fantastic. What preparation is there a particular preparation for a CUI audit and assessment that small business must engage in to ensure that they're ready for compliance? Is there any particular approach to that, or is that an individual companies do based upon their access to data. The broader question is about preparation. What does a small company need to do to prepare for an audit?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I would say just one thing that really helps, and Bob, you can probably go into more detail on this, but we use GRC tools that stores all the evidence, all the artifacts, checks off all the controls and the objectives. So and generate your SSP, all of that good stuff. So that to me is a critical component that we're able to provide and customers can leverage to if your score isn't 110 on your GRC tool, you're probably not ready.
Right. It's tougher, even though a small or entity might be simpler in their scope and what they have to do. It's pretty overwhelming what the requirements are on it. I mean, you get into MFA setup and everything. Well, who's going to manage it? 5-person company. They're just doing some projects for the Army. They really don't have, an internal IT person, really good qualified one. They turn around to their MSP. The MSP never heard of CMMC. And so now where do they go? And that's part of the problem, is that I've seen to where some of them have gone out in the industry and gotten burnt a little bit, where they come back and I hear, yeah, we went and spent X amount of dollars for this. And can you please review, because I don't believe we're 110. And you look at them, they are 110. So, and I don't have an answer for this. It's really, really tough to know who can I trust out there. I think you look a little bit of the history. What have they done before? Have they done work with DIB, with DoD, in doing auditing and assessing, and also do they have a good audit background, good IT background with it? You want to look at, how long they've been around, etc. with it. Look at the history, interview them, and you'll be able to tell pretty quick, the people that really know this stuff and that don't. But definitely do your work on it, and definitely interview several of them, and you'll be able to, as you talk with the different providers out there, you'll be able to tell who really knows what they're doing and who doesn't with it. But that's up to the small contractors to really go out and have the due diligence to do that.
Kind of sounds as though if you are a company that does very little negligible work with the DoD prime or sub, you might want to compare the cost of, or the revenue that you get from that business with the cost of becoming certified. So it kind of sounds as though it might be a trade-off. Is that a fair statement? I mean, if you're a small business doing a small amount of work with the DoD or DoD entity, you might not want to engage in the effort.
Yeah, that actually, Philip, comes up all the time in our conversations for these small to medium-sized companies that have just a small fraction of their business with DoD. And it's not even the cost of getting there, because we're relatively inexpensive from an enclave perspective, but the cost of the assessment itself, and maybe Kelly and Chris can talk to that, but that's just because you're a small 5-person company doesn't mean you're going to be 20% of the cost of a larger company. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we have less than about 5 minutes left. Any closing thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, I just have one. I'd say start small, right? If you're just a lot of companies back 5, 6, 7 years ago, before CMMC, when it was just 800, 171, you had to have an SSP, an IRP, a POAM, and you registered on DibNet, and then companies would turn to their contractors, their assessors, and say, what do I need to do now? So, well, you're compliant right now. Well, what about my POAM items? Well, you don't have to do that. You're compliant. Okay, well, I won't do anything. So now these companies are circling back around and they're literally starting over, right? And so my suggestion is start small, get a small area compliant, and then expand from there.
The other thing I would say is that as a small contractor, if you're simple and it's pretty much just email, and let's say O365, there's probably a lot of options for you out there to be able to go. Once you go and start putting in applications, whether it's CAD based or whatever, now all of a sudden you got a complex operation. And I know that's where Steve's talked about with the Lifeline, with the fast track of being able to help them with that, control that, because once you start putting these applications integrated in with everything else, the scope just opens up so high. And again, CUI boundary diagram, good one to start with, and I will show you.
Absolutely. So again, thanks for the audience. I know you've been steady listening to the valuable information that was being shared with you. This presentation will be mailed to everyone who registered for the event. So if you wanted to talk a little bit more about these issues, CUI, with any one of the panel members, you will have access to their email, and they're in the chat. We have plenty of good resources for you to utilize as you undertake your CMMC journey. So again, thank you very much for taking the time. You guys have yourself a wonderful summer, and we will see you on our next webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks.